Hi guys, I'm back. I've been trying to record. It hasn't worked out. It's a long story. So anyway, I'm going to continue reading. We're on chapter 32, Adriano Lemmi. This chapter is compiled largely of extracts, some transcribed verbatim and others elaborated to include information necessary to the reader, from Adriano Lemmi by Domenico Margiotta, 33 degree. Adriano Lemmi was born of Roman Catholic parents at Leghorn, Tuscany, on April 30th, 1822. He was the son of Fortunato Lemmi and Teresa Merlino, his lawful wife. At an early age, he became the despair of his parents. He was dissolute, frequented evil haunts, and formed undesirable friendships. Running away from home on December 29, 1843, he forged a letter stating under the letterhead of Falconet & Co. that a credit for his account was to be opened on Pastor Brothers, bankers at Marseille, where shortly after his arrival he scraped acquaintance with Monsieur and Madame Grand Bouban, whom he was soon accused of having robbed of 300 francs. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and he was condemned to a year in prison for that and other minor offenses, and also sentenced to 5 years on probation. He served his term and bolted to Constantinople. Arriving there early in April 1845, he eked out a precarious existence, first as a kitchen hand, then as the assistant in the shop of an old apothecary, whose preparations he peddled in the streets of Galata. His employer had a friend, a Polish rabbi, who, having been condemned for conspiracy in Russia, had taken refuge in Constantinople. This man took a fancy to him, and in an effort to curry favor with the Jews, Lemmi presently asked if he might be received into the religion of Moses. As a diplomatic move, the suggestion was great success, for the apothecary and the rabbi, proud and jubilant to have secured a neophyte, taught him the Talmud, while another rabbi, Abraham Maggioro, instructed him in the mysteries of the Kabbalah. Together they initiated him into the secrets of magic, in which he proved an apt pupil, and his lot was much improved, but the old apothecary died in 1847, and Lemmi found himself without employment. The Polish rabbi having left Constantinople, he stayed on a while under the protection of his friend Maggioro. 1 second, I'm going to take a drink. Okay, I'm sorry. What I did was I made a coffee before I started, and I like to drink that hot. Terribly sorry. I don't want to break off this recording, though. Anyway, here I go. In those days, the few Freemasons coming to Pera were English. Freemasonry had been introduced into Turkey in 1738, but until the Crimean War it suffered many, what in the world is this word? Vicissitudes? The English saw their lodges fade away for want of active members, for the government did not favor them. Adriano Lemmi was supposed to have been initiated into Freemasonry in 1848 by an English Mason, but this ceremony seems to have somehow been irregular, as it had to be repeated at a later date. Finally, the era of his trial seemed to end. In 1849, some of his English Masonic friends gave him a letter of introduction to the great Magyar Kossuth, who had come to Constantinople a fugitive from public opprobrium in his own country. To save him from starvation, Kossuth took him as a servant at low wages, but he gradually succeeded in ingratiating himself with his patron, till finally he became his secretary on the recommendation of Mazzini, with whom he was already in correspondence. When Kossuth went to the United States in 1851, he was accompanied by Lemmi. They were forced to travel via Gibraltar and London, as the French authorities refused Kossuth permission to land in France, and Lemmi, knowing that he was wanted by the French police, knew better than to try to do so. In Lodge number 133 in Cincinnati, USA, Kossuth received the Masonic initiation. On the 2nd of December, 1851, Prince Louis Napoleon, then President of the French Republic, announced to the people and the army his intention of submitting to a referendum the plan of a constitution founded on the system favored by his uncle. It was a coup d'etat. At this news, Lemmi left Kossuth in America and went to join Mazzini and Ledru Rollin in London. By this time, Mazzini had already established his reputation as an international intriguer. The youth movement of the day was already organized. The societies composing it were Young Italy, founded by Mazzini, Young Poland, founded by Simon Konarski. Oh, I forgot the dates. 1831, Young Italy. Young Poland, 1834. Young England, founded by Benjamin Disraeli, 1834. Young Europe, founded by Mazzini, 1834. Young Switzerland, founded by Meleghari, Emery, 1835. Young Ireland, founded by Smith O'Brien, 1843. Young Germany, founded by Hecker and Struve, 1848. The oath taker by the members of Young Italy reads as follows. In the name of God and of Italy, in the name of all the martyrs of the holy Italian cause who have fallen beneath foreign and domestic tyranny, by the duties which bind me to the land wherein God has placed me, and to the brothers whom God has given me, by the love innate in all men, I bear to the country that gave my mother birth and will be the home of my children. By the hatred innate in all men, I bear to evil, injustice, usurpation, and arbitrary rule, by the blush that rises to my brow when I stand before the citizens of other lands, to know that I have no rights of citizenship, no country, and no national flag, and by aspiration that thrills my soul towards that liberty for which it was created and is impotent to exert, towards the good it was created to strive after, and is impotent to achieve in the silence and isolation of slavery. By the memory of our former greatness and the sense of our present degradation, by the tears of Italian mothers for their sons dead on the scaffold, in prison, or in exile, by the sufferings of the millions, I, believing in the mission entrusted by God to Italy and the duty of every Italian to strive to attempt its fulfillment, convinced that where God has ordained that a nation shall be, he has given the requisite power to create it, that the people are the depositaries of that power, and that in its right direction for the people and by the people lies the secret of victory, convinced that virtue consists in action and sacrifice, and strength in union and constancy of purpose, I give my name to Young Italy, an association of men holding the same faith, and swear to dedicate myself wholly and forever to the endeavor which with them to constitute Italy one free, independent, republican nation, to promote by every means in my power, whether by written or spoken word or by action, the education of my Italian brothers towards the aim of Young Italy, towards association, the sole means of its accomplishment, and to virtue, which alone can render the conquest lasting, to abstain from enrolling myself in any other association from this time forth, to obey all the instructions in conformity with the spirit of Young Italy, given me by those who represent with me the union of my Italian brothers, and to keep the secret of these instructions, even at the cost of my life, to assist my brothers of the association, both by action and counsel, now and forever. This do I swear, invoking upon my head the wrath of God, the abhorrence of man, and the infamy of the perjurer, if I ever betray the whole or part of this my oath. The fusion of Young Italy and Carbonarism evidently did not take place till after April 8, 1839, for in a letter of that date Mazzini writes to L.A. Meleghari at Lausanne, "It is a mixture of Young Italy and Carbonarism. They have had me approached indirectly to know if I accept the fusion." After 1851, Lemmi began playing an important part in all the political Masonic assassinations and in all the popular insurrections of which Italy was the scene. On behalf of Mazzini, he kept up relations with the revolutionaries of Tuscany, and it was he who inspired the attempt to assassinate the counselor of the Grand Duke's minister, Baldessaroni, in broad daylight on October 21st, 1852. 1 second. I'm sorry. My coffee's getting cold. I hope that doesn't bother you. Anyway. A letter from which we quote, written from Malta by Francesco Crispi to Mazzini, dated November 13, 1853, gives a most interesting sidelight on the relations then existent between the great Italian revolutionary, his ally Crispi, and Adriano Lemmi, whom Crispi already recognizes as the agent of an organization inimical to his ideals. Brother, the die is cast. At the present moment, an uprising in Sicily is imminent, if indeed it has not already taken place. God grant it may not prove a second 6th of February. Knowing that I was here, you should have forewarned me. Those to whom you have seen fit to entrust the initiative will not be able to exert any influence whatsoever in the provinces of Palermo and Messina. Their names indeed may even be greeted there with hostility and bring about a reaction. Now, without Palermo and Messina, every attempt in Sicily will prove vain. But what is done, and our plain duty now is to work together in helping on the undertaking and, as far as possible, the warding off evil consequences. Let me know the plan of action and what orders you have issued to the leaders. Although I have little regard for them, I intend to do my duty, and this for the good of our country and party, upon whose already tarnished reputation another failure would bring utter ruin. You will remember that ever since 1850 I have been ready to hasten to Sicily. At that time, At the time, we are working to form the National Committee and raise the loan that should provide funds for any great emergency. Then the Sicilian Committee was formed and speedily dissolved, while you worked to prepare an uprising in northern and central Italy, forgetting Sicily entirely, but not so many. So my friends and I, who were convinced that the greatest possibility of success lay in this island, nor was this all. After your misfortunes in Lombardy, you forgot your old friends and flung yourself onto the arms of men who, up to that very moment, had held you and your theories up to ridicule, but who had been clever enough to deceive you through Signor Lemmi, to whom they had declared their intention to act. I am no more their enemy than are any of the friends who belong to the party opposed to Calvi. On February 6, 1853, an incipient insurrection broke out in Milan, then under Austrian dominion, as the result of a proclamation signed by Mazzini and Kossuth. That it was sent by Lemmi from Switzerland to the revolutionary Lombards is a fact well known in Italian Masonry. Though implicated, the Swiss and Piedmontese governments tried to appear unconcerned. Numerous refugees from northern Italy went to Switzerland or Piedmont following the instructions transmitted by Lemmi. Piedmont, assisted by England, who was secretly helping Mazzini's Masonry, tried to induce the Emperor of Austria to issue a decree confiscating the properties of the revolutionary refugees, but a bloody protest was made against the measure on the 18th of February when, by order of Kossuth and Mazzini, a revolutionary fanatic made an attempt against the life of the emperor. Lemmi was chosen to arm the assassin, who was a Hungarian and a mutual friend of both Kossuth and himself. Switzerland, under the threat of severance of diplomatic relation, was then obliged to banish indiscriminately all political refugees. Then came the Crimean War, the real cause of which were known only to the chiefs of Freemasonry. England and Piedmont worked up a quarrel with Russia about Turkey over the respective spheres of influence of the Christian, Greek, and Catholic churches at Jerusalem. This rivalry was of little real consequence either to England or Piedmont, but it served to turn France against Russia on the pretext of protecting Turkey. The truth was that for a long time, long before the Hungarian insurrection of Kossuth, the secret chiefs of Masonry, headed by Lord Palmerston, had made a plan according to which Prussia was to be exalted at the expense of Austria. German unity was to be achieved to the advantage of the Prussian monarchy, as well as that of Italy, to the benefit of the House of Savoy, and a Polish Magyar state was to be created. Fearing that the Hungarian insurrection might spread to his Polish provinces, a community of monarchic interests had impelled the Tsar to reach an understanding with the Austrian emperor, which had helped to hinder the success of Magyar revolutionaries. Until this entente could be broken up, the Masonic chiefs knew that German and Italian unity would remain a dream. Austria was the dupe in this war. As for France, she had to fight with the army of Piedmont so as to prepare public opinion in both countries for the next move against Austria. All this had been combined by Lord Palmerston, who knew how to get his way with all the other secret chiefs. Not accepting Mazzini, Kossuth naturally favored the Masonic program. He wished death to the Tsar for having caused him to lose his position in Hungary. It is also easy to understand how Napoleon III was drawn into the affair. The chiefs of this sect only had to remind him of his oath as Carbonaro and show him the laurels to be won. Mazzini and Kossuth urged on the Crimean War, and English diplomacy prevented Austria from joining Russia. From then on, that power, being opposed by France, England, Piedmont, and Turkey, faced inevitable defeat, which happened after a war lasting 2 years. Austria was separated forever from Russia and was punished for her ingratitude, for without even waiting for the end of hostilities, the Mason chiefs who had used her so successfully started the work of revolution on her territory. This war served a great purpose for Adriano Lemmi. It enabled him to get rich. Through his relations with Mazzini and Kossuth, he obtained contracts for Italian ambulances for the Crimea. These he sent from Geneva, pocketing a large part of the money. He paid the rest with bad checks and fled to Malta. This was his first big theft, but his flight did not prevent him and his 2 accomplices from being condemned by default by the Swiss judge. On January 4th, 1855, Mazzini, chief of the Central European Committee, the title Mazzini assumed as leader of Young Europe, called a meeting of his accomplices in London, at which F. Felix Piat, the president of the branch group known as the Communist Revolutionaries, was present. These 2 committees were in correspondence with one in Brussels, one in Jersey, and one in Geneva. At this meeting, the death of Charles III, Duke of Parma, was unanimously voted, and Mazzini sent Lemmi a passport in the name of Louis Broom, under the protection of which he immediately left Malta for the Duchy of Parma. During the 1 day he spent there, he organized a secret meeting at Castel Guelfo for March the 25th, during which lots were drawn, and a man called Antonio Cara was thus duly selected by fate to do the deed. Lessons in stabbing were then given on a dummy, and Adriano, who presided at the assembly, addressing the assassin-elect, said, "This day is the feast of the Jesuits and nuns, when they celebrate the apparition to their Madonna of an angel announcing the advent of Messiah as her son. Brother, I announce to thee that thou wilt be the Messiah of the revolution of Parma. I consecrate thee, liberator of the oppressed, savior of tyrannized men. Strike the despot, let not thy hand falter. Our God, who is not the God of the priests, will protect thee." 2 days later, Charles III fell under the attack of an alleged fanatic who made good his escape. The circumstances of the plot are known because Lemmi often boasted of the part he played in it to Fra Poli and others who repeated the story. Mazzini often acknowledged that his little Jew was worth 10 good men, so clever was he at choosing the right man for the important jobs, and so able at inspiring them with the energy necessary for doing their duty. The Parma business greatly enhanced the value of Lemmi in the eyes of the principal chiefs. He remained incognito for several days at Sant Lario, but the revolution did not come off, for the crime was received by the people with horror, and the widow of Charles III, the daughter of the Duc de Berry, was proclaimed regent of her son Robert, a child of 6. Still under the false name of Louis Broom, Lemmi went to Reggio, then to Modena, returning to the Duchy of Parma in the last days of June, where he prepared the abortive insurrection of July 22nd, which was quickly suppressed. In January 1855, the Piedmontese government suppressed 334 religious institutions at the instigation of the revolutionary societies, which, thanks to complicity under the guise of tolerance, were unhindered in the development of their criminal resources. Lemmi, who had at his disposal as many false papers as might be necessary for his secret missions, again changed his name. Armed with a Hungarian passport belonging to one of the henchmen of Kossuth, he went to Rome under the name of Ulrich Putsch, professional cook, and on June 12th there was an attempt to kill Cardinal Antonelli. He immediately reappeared at Genoa, where on the 13th of the month a manifesto was published by Mazzini inciting the people to insurrection. This was spread by Lemmi in several towns, notably even in Rome, where, by a curious coincidence, on July 9th, the same day on which he returned to the city of the popes, an attempt was made on the life of Father Beck, the general of the Jesuits. In all these movements, in all these crimes, where Lemmi's hand is not visible, those of his associates always were. Lemmi and Orsini, the latter also an agent of Mazzini, had transmitted to the Revolutionary Committee of Milan their chief's instruction in view of imminent uprising. Having received their instructions, Lemmi went to Switzerland with his Hungarian passport, and Orsini, under the name of George Hernasch, went to Austria, where an insurrection, timed to occur simultaneously with that in Lombardy, was to be fomented. Orsini was arrested at Hermannstadt in Transylvania, brought back to Vienna, and transferred to Mantua, where he was judged and condemned to death for high treason on August 20th, 1855. Locked up in the castle of San Giorgio, he succeeded in escaping on the night of March 29th, 1856. Locked up in the castle of San Giorgio. Oh, I'm sorry. I already read that. Sorry. On November 13th of the same year, 2 other agents of Mazzini were taken at Rome. Under the pretext that the King of Naples was not observing strict neutrality towards Russia, Lord Palmerston obtained the disgrace of Mazza, the Neapolitan director of police. In his move, he was aided by Mazzini, who, having caused certain confidential papers to be stolen, knew some things that were none of his business. Mazza, devoted to the king, had been his protector against machinations of the secret societies. Napoleon III, too, allowed himself to be influenced by Palmerston, who, as a patriarch of European Freemasonry, favored one of his pet projects. This involved the appointment of Prince Murat, Grand Master of the Grand Orient of France, to the throne of Naples, and the 2 Sicilies, and the elimination of the House of Bourbon. England and France presently threatened to send a squadron to Naples, but owing to the protest of Russia, the threat was never carried out. In September 1856, the European Committee decided that the King of Naples should be assassinated, and that at the same time there should be an insurrection in Sicily. A man named Baron de Bentivedna, who had been introduced by an English high mason, Henri Mislay, to Mazzini in London, was entrusted with the task of fomenting the trouble. While Lemmi took charge of the murder, according to the plan, Ferdinand II was to be blown up by a bomb thrown under his carriage by some fanatic selected by Lemmi. Armed with 2 bombs, Lemmi went to Sicily. He now traveled under a French passport provided for him by a friend through Ledru Rollin, and made out under the name of Jacques Latoul, merchant. Everything was ready, both in Palermo and Naples. The dates of the assassination of the king and the outbreak of the revolution were fixed for November 22nd, but the individual chosen to perform the deed, Filippo Carabi, suddenly lost interest in the project when he realized that the bomb destined for the king would also inevitably prove fatal to himself. Lemmi was angry over this unexpected check. It was then too late to recruit another executioner, but the disobedient Sicilian was eventually punished. For 5 years later, he was murdered in a Neapolitan lodge where he had gone without apprehension. The archives of the Directory of Naples contain the details of the affair. The sequestration of Carabi in 1861, his accusation before a secret tribunal, the terrible tortures to which he was subjected, and his last horrible agony shrouded in mystery. Lemmi, now unable to have the assassination and the plot coincide, stayed on nevertheless in Naples as he hoped to find a substitute for the defaulting murderer. On the appointed day, November 22nd, Bentivegna raised the banner of revolt at Cefalù, near Palermo. Jacques Latour, finding himself obliged to substitute another for the bomb method of assassination, induced a soldier called Agesilas Milano to attempt the life of the king. So while Ferdinand II was reviewing his troops, Milano stepped forward and struck him twice in the chest with his bayonet. Luckily for the king, the instrument bent, failing even to wound him. Milano was arrested, judged, and shot, but Mazzini, qualifying him as a martyr, had a commemoration medal struck in his honor. As for the insurrection in Sicily, it was suppressed. Bentivegna was captured and shot on December 20th, but Lemmi Latour left the country as soon as he realized that things were not going well. His identity was never revealed and can today only be definitely established by the records of the secret Masonic trial of Filippo Carabi in the archives of the Directory of Naples. In 1857, a splendid farce was enacted by Piedmont. It has since been repeatedly proved that Cavour and Ratazzi were in agreement with the Mazzinians and the Garibaldians with regard to the scheme for the United Italy under the House of Savoy. That is to say, they favored the dispossession of the legitimate sovereigns of the Duchies of Tuscany, Parma, Modena, the Papal States, and the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, and the wresting of Lombardy and Venice from Austria. In the eyes of the European monarchs, who were not in a secret, Piedmont wished to appear innocent of any connivance in the plot, and to have been forced only reluctantly to acquiesce. The secretary and faithful friend of Count Cavour was the Piemontese Isaac Arton, while Loper, later rabbi of Turin and also the friend and counselor of Mazzini, was one of the most open advocates of Italian independence. A few Masons in English, French, and Prussian diplomacy alone knew what was being plotted, so the International Committee of London decreased an upheaval in Tuscany for the year 1857, and in order that Piedmont might not be suspected of complicity, it was arranged that an insurrection should be staged in the kingdom at the same time as the one in Tuscany. That was the comedy. The insurrection occurred but failed in its object. In London, the same year, Mazzini hatched a plot against Napoleon III. It was not the first. As the French emperor did not seem sufficiently active on behalf of Italian unity, it was decided to stimulate him by terror. Mazzini, Kossuth, and Ledru-Rollin were reinforced in the Committee of London by Herzen, Bakunin, Tour, and Klapka, and early in the year 1857, Paolo Tebaldi, Giuseppe Bartolotti, and Paolo Grilli were chosen by Mazzini and Ledru-Rollin to kill Napoleon. Mazzarenti, another tool of Mazzini's, gave them 50 golden Napoleons when they left for Paris to perpetrate the crime, and addressing them before their departure, Mazzini said, "You will study the habits of the emperor, and you will strike when you find the opportunity favorable." Mazzarenti, Campanelli, Campanella, Tibaldi, Grilli, and Bartolotti, the active tools of the plot, were all personal friends of Lemmi. To quote the words of the imperial attorney at the hearing of the Court of Assizes at Paris, August 7, 1857, when Grilli was sentenced to deportation, Mazzini and Ledru Rollin were the chiefs of the plots, object of which was assassination. Phew, I gotta take a short break. On January 14, 1858, at the door of the Opera House in Paris, another attempt was made on the life of the French emperor. 3 bombs killed eight and wounded 156 persons. Some of the guilty were arrested, but others, among whom was our hero, Adriano Lemmi, was now masquerading under the name of James MacGregor. Escaped, Lemmi had come to Paris ostensibly to visit Giuseppe Mazzoni, his Tuscan compatriot, then professor of languages in the French capital. Orsini, who had taken the pseudonym of Aslop on reaching Paris, Pieri and Rudio, and principal actors in the drama, were caught and condemned to death. The first 2 were executed, Rudio's sentence being commuted to hard labor for life. Orsini was not unknown to Napoleon III. Together they had belonged to the Lodge of Cessna as members of the Carbonari. In 1874, the Giornale di Firenze published the account of Napoleon's visit to his imprisoned assassin, who warned him that unless he showed a disposition to help the unity of Italy, other bombs were reserved for him. Napoleon acquiesced, and one saw the famous will of Felix Orsini, published by the Imperial Official Journal, which enabled the French deputy, Monsieur Keller, to remark before the legislative body on March 13, 1861, that the Italian war was the execution of the will of Orsini. We must here be permitted a somewhat lengthy digression unfolding the progress of political corruption and its affinity with secret societies. As a result of the Orsini conspiracy, Palmerston sponsored the Conspiracy to Murder Bill, a measure framed to hamper international assassins and the free use of English territory for hatching plots against, foreign potentates. The bill passed its first reading in Parliament, Disraeli voting for it, but the second reading, Milner Gibson, a radical, moved an amendment which was in effect a vote to censor the Palmerston and a challenge to the French. This was eventually carried by 19 votes, Disraeli's support being, of course, a decisive factor. An explanation of this change of front is afforded in Ashley's Life of Lord Palmerston. Seated in the Peers' Gallery, Lord Derby listened to the debate and watched the tide rise against the Prime Minister. Convinced that he could be overthrown, he sent hasty word to the lieutenant that they should take it at the flood which led to office, and thereupon Disraeli plunged into the stream. I'm going to have to break it off. Let me see how many more pages I have. 1 second. Yeah, it's going to get too long. I'm going to have to... Sorry about that, guys. I'm going to continue next time. Well, you guys will probably get the whole video, but I need to take a break, so I will catch it later. All right? Take care, everyone.